We are in the book of Nehemiah chapter 13. I'm not going to use a handout this morning, so if you want to grab a Bible that's in there in the rack in front of you, you're welcome to follow along in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a tremendous leader, a tremendous man of influence, but he's a captive. He is in the he's in the country of Babylon. And one of the Babylonian Persian kings has allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem if they want to, but the few who have gone back are in terrible danger and disgrace because the city's broken down, the walls are broken down, the gates are burned with fire, and it's a bad situation. There's no leadership, there's no vision to make this place better, and Nehemiah hears about this, and God just breaks his heart over it. And God says, Nehemiah, go back. And he puts it in his heart to go back. He talks to the king. He puts the project together. Nehemiah is a talented leader and project organizer. So he organizes everything up. He goes back. They rebuild the wall in 52 days. And then they have a huge celebration. They just have a tremendous choirs and an orchestra and people, the whole city gathered together, and they march around the outside of the wall, on top of the wall. That's how thick the wall is. People march across the top of the wall. The two choirs marching in opposite directions. They come around and they meet in the middle where all the people are gathered, and it's a huge thing. It's a great party. It's amazing, and they rededicate themselves to the worship of God and to the keeping of God's law, and they say, never again are we going to walk away from the Lord. It's never going to happen. They rebuilt the wall. They repented for sin. They remade the covenant with God. And then in Nehemiah chapter 13, that's where we jump in today. On that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people. Okay, so they had a big convocation. They read the Bible. And it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call down a curse on them. Our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing. So that actually was a story from the Old Testament, a really neat story I don't have time to go into right this minute. But God changed the words that Balaam was trying to curse them with and made it come out as a blessing, and it was an amazing story. But there's actually one more piece to this, that after Balaam could not succeed in cursing God's people, in order to satisfy his greed and receive a reward from the king of Moab and the king of Ammon, Balaam said to them, now listen, I can't curse what God has blessed, but I can tell you how to make it so they will be cursed. So God will curse them. And he told them, here's how you do it. You take some of your beautiful ladies from your tribe, and you go down and you convince them to marry in with you, and you convince them to become sexually immoral with these women, and God's favor will be pulled back from his people, and then you'll be able to conquer them. And it worked. And when that happened, it actually turned all of God's favor away from the Israelites, because God doesn't just say, I'm just going to continue to bless sin forever and ever. God doesn't do that. He's holy, and he wanted to make an example of a holy people, and here they are being just like the nations around them. So God pulls back his blessing from his people. So now that was recorded in the Old Testament. They're all together now, and they're reading this story, and God had said, I don't want any Moabites or any Ammonites in the people of God at all. And they hear this, verse 3, when the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of foreign descent. Okay, so at that moment, they're like, oh, hey, that guy over there, I know, he's an Ammonite. Oh, we don't want to bring God's judgment on us again. We just spent 70 years as slaves in a foreign land because of God's judgment. So there's some obedience here. Now, somewhere in here, it's not really recorded, but Nehemiah leaves Jerusalem. You remember how at the beginning of the story, Nehemiah talked to the king and he said, I'm going to go rebuild, there's going to be a project, and it's going to be a big deal. And the king said, how long do you think it's going to take? And he said, I set him a time. right? I gave him an estimate. Here's how long I think I'm going to be gone. Apparently that time ran out, and Nehemiah goes back to the king like he promised, okay? So he got everything organized. We rebuilt it. We rededicated ourselves to following God. We're going to follow God no matter what. And then he leaves and goes back to the king. Suddenly, the aggressive, strong leader is gone. And anybody ever heard the phrase, nature hates a vacuum, right? Like whenever there's a vacuum, something tries to rush in to fill it, right? So if you suck all the air out of a plastic, out of a bottle, like I did when I was a kid, or you take a cup, right? And you put it around your mouth like this, and you suck all the air out so it sticks to your mouth. Anybody ever do that when you were a kid, right? And then when you let go, what happened? There's a ring right there, right? Because your chin and your mouth was trying to go into the cup to replace the vacuum. You know what I'm talking about? Nature, everything, when there's a vacuum, an empty place, something tries to rush into that empty place. Nehemiah, as a strong leader, steps back and leaves, and something happens. All of a sudden, sin comes rushing in. By the way, sin also hates a vacuum. You leave an empty spot in your life, and the devil will make sure that a sin will rush in to fill that spot. You know what I'm saying? And the old idea of idle hands, or the devil's workshop, and all that whole thing. Idle mind. There we go. Idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? Empty mind. Oh, I just don't know what I want to do today. I got no plan. Maybe I'll just sit here and browse around on the internet. And in rushes sin, right? And I don't know what I'm going to do today, and I just got no plan, and maybe I'll just browse around on Facebook, and after a while, in rushes sin. I've got a whole day, I'm just not going to do anything. Well, hey, that's fine. That's fine to rest and step back away from your work. Just understand that sin loves to swoop in and fill holes, fill vacuums in your life. And Nehemiah steps out as the strong leader and in rushes a real issue. If you don't fill the empty places in your heart with love for Jesus, they will fill back up with love for sin. I have seen it happen over and over and over again. I've seen people in a service just like this, where God moves and God is close. It feels like God is right there and you can almost touch Him. And people start feeling the brokenness of sin. And they'll even come forward sometimes and pray and really oh, I'm sorry for sin. I just want to be done with this and get it out of my life. But they don't fill that empty spot. They got rid of some things. They pushed out some things, but they don't fill up that empty spot with something positive. And guess what happens? It rushes right back in again, doesn't it? In fact, Jesus actually told us this same thing. He said back in the Gospels, he said, when an evil spirit is cast out of someone's heart, cast out of a person's life, it wanders through looking for a place to go, a new place to live, a new heart to live in. And if it can't find one, it goes back to that house it came from, that person's heart, and finds it swept and cleaned out. Now notice, it says he's swept and cleaned out, but it didn't say that God was there in its place, right? It didn't say Jesus was living in that heart. Instead, it's just swept and emptied out. So the bad has gotten rid of, but there's no good coming in to replace. And he said, then he goes and gets 7 demons more wicked than himself, and they all move in together, and the end of that person is worse than the beginning. How many times have you seen this happen, right? An addiction cycle, and somebody, no, you know what, this time I'm really serious. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of some stuff. And they empty out some things out of their life, but they don't refill it with Jesus, and refill it with the Holy Spirit's presence, and refill it with love for God, and refill it with a church family. And what rushes right back in? Those same relationships, those same activities, those same parties on the weekend, those same things rush right back in. And that's what's just about to happen here. Now, verse number 4. Before this, Eliashib the priest had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. Now, I'll just stop and explain something real quick. The temple, the house of God, as in those days, the temple. Now we are the temple. But in those days, the house of God was this huge building, this huge temple, and it had a big court for worship, a worship place for everybody to gather together. And it had the holy place in the middle. But it also had some very large rooms around the outside, along the sides, for storage. Now imagine the logistics and storage for all these ongoing sacrifices and the offerings being brought in. People are always coming and traveling from around the nation of Israel and bringing in their offerings. They've got animals and they've got grain offerings and all these priests serve at this huge temple. Solomon's temple, they say the courts would hold 50,000 people. We're talking about a big, big deal. Along the outside of this are all these storage rooms in the outside of the temple. And so Eliashib the priest was put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. He was closely associated with, everybody say, Tobiah. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, there's a blast of scary music happens right here. Because Tobiah, anybody remember Sanballat and Tobiah from earlier in this series? These are the two guys who were mouthing off and making fun and trying to discourage the workers and trying to convince them, we need you to come to a meeting and stop the work on the wall. Come to a meeting. We've heard bad reports about you. We're going to have to... And they've tried all these, and then when that didn't work, they started making fun. Well, yeah, a fox jump up on that wall and it would knock it down. They started mouthing off and they sent letters back to the king and to the governors in that area saying the Jews are going to rebel. They're going to rebel. It's going to be bad. They had tried everything to try to stop the progress on this place. Now, I'm not sure why. Did they have economic reasons? Were they just mad at the Jews? I don't know. I don't know exactly what the deal was. But there's some reason why they wanted in. They had some, I'm guessing there was probably some kind of financial arrangement they had. They felt like they could cheat people. They could make money out of it. Now, look at this. He provided him, verse 5, he provided Tobiah with a large room formerly used to store the grain offerings and incense and temple articles, and also the tithes of grain, new wine and oil prescribed for the Levites, singers and gatekeepers, as well as the contributions for the priests. So there's this huge, y'all hold on for me just for 1 second. There's this huge thing. Oh, somebody moved my box. Thank you very much, but I had it sitting out here for a reason. Okay, here we go. All right. I know it looked terrible, but I had a reason for setting out here. All right. So somebody has allowed Eliashib, in the vacuum created by the moving of a strong leader, Eliashib has allowed Tobiah to move in to the side door of the house of God. And an enemy comes in the back door. Right? All of a sudden, there's an enemy who has said, he pulls a few strings, he gets some relationships and hey, Eliashib, you remember all the favors that I did for you? And you remember that I've got to actually, I know about some land you could purchase real cheap, and then you could flip it around and sell it, for a little bit more. Are you interested? You are interested. Okay, by the way, I've got a place I need to store some stuff. Do you have a room along the side of the temple, one of those storage rooms? I won't take up much room, I promise. And before you know it, here we are. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of people, and they're carrying in Tobiah's stuff, and they're setting up shop, and he's filling up. And by the way, when you allow the devil to sneak in the back door of your life, he'll establish a foothold, and then he'll start growing his power, and the tentacles will reach out further and further and further into your life until you just allow a small thing. It might be, what could it be? Well, it could be bitterness, just bitter at somebody. You know what I'm saying? Because they did me wrong, and they can't treat me that way. And I've got rights, and you don't know what they did to me. They did this and they said that, and after a little while, it gets infected. right? And it turns into a little bit of anger and a little bit of hatred. And before long, you're a little more bitter and a little more, and before long you're saying things about that person that you would have never said before, and you're mouthing off to different people and you're telling the story, and after a while that bitterness just kind of tends to grow, and everybody's done you wrong after a while, right? And that person too. And I tell you what, and after a while, have you ever met somebody and they're like in their latter decades of their life and they can tell you everything anybody ever did wrong to them? What happened? Somewhere back, they weren't always a mad 70-year-old. At some point, they were a mad 25-year-old, right? And they just didn't take care of it. They let some junk get in the side rooms of the house of God. Am I making sense to you? Because this is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And they let some junk just come in and just stay there in a side room. And after a while, there's an enemy who's just crept in the back door. And he's taking up residence in the house of God. Verse 6. But while all this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem. For the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Sometime later, I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Oh, it's going to be big, boys. There's going to be a hot time on the old town tonight. It is going to be bad. He's going to crack the whip. I mean, it is going to come in. There's a time to encourage and a time to be sweet and a time to be kind and a time to be patient. And then there's a time to kick behind and take names, right? And Nehemiah is coming back and he's going to kick behind and chew bubble gum, and he's all out of bubble gum. All right? It is going to be bad. So he comes back, and here I learn, verse 7, about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the house of the courts of God. He comes back home, and he walks into the storage room. He's going to tour the temple. Oh, it's so good to be back in Jerusalem. Good to see the walls still standing. Everything's going all right. Let's go over here in this side room, and he walks into Whose stuff is this? Excuse me, you right there. Whose is this right here? Oh, this is Tobiah's. Uh-oh. And I was, verse 8, greatly displeased. And I threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. Now, you've probably never seen this happen in church before, okay? Nehemiah walks in and he says, what is going on? This is whose stuff? Tobiah. That Tobiah? Get this stuff out of here. Get this stuff out of here. Hey, what are you doing? Get this stuff out of here. What are you doing with this stuff? I don't want to see his stuff. I don't want to hear his name. I don't want to see him in here. Get it out of here. That felt pretty good, actually. Yeah. After this week, yeah. So I gave orders, verse 9, I gave orders to purify these rooms. All right, bring in some water and bring in some soap and bring in some scrub. We're going to scrub the smell of Tobiah off these walls, y'all. I don't want to see dust off of Tobiah's shoes in this room. And then I put back into them the equipment of the house of God and the grain offerings and the incense. Now, listen to me very carefully. Do you notice that when Tobiah moved in, the thing that moved out was the priority of worshiping God? Okay? Because it used to be that all this place was a storage place for holy things. It was a storage place for sacred things. It was a place and a space for the worship of God. And all of a sudden, it's filled up with a bunch of junk that belongs to an enemy of God because somebody let him sneak in the back door and gave him a spot, gave him a space. And sometimes in your life and in mine, there is a time to be nice and patient and quiet and kind. And there is a time when there's a time to say kind words. And there's a time to be understanding. But when there is an enemy in the house, that is not that time. It is time to stand up and say, what is going on here? Why is this like this? When you look into your heart and you find that the enemy has kind of gradually crept in the back door and has just established a little stronghold here, a little place where he can insert his little influences into your life. It is time to reach down and grab some stuff and throw it and say, get the smell of this person out of my life. Yeah. What is the enemy doing here? Well, let's see. It was a person that took up space that was supposed to belong to God. Now, is there anything in your life that sometimes you find takes up space that ought to belong to God? Maybe takes up time that ought to belong to God. Maybe takes up space in your brain that ought to belong to God. Are there thought processes? Are there habits in your life? Are there things that you watch or things that you listen to that are taking up real estate in this brain, and this whole brain belongs to God, and it's taking up space in your thoughts that really ought to belong to God? It ought to be used for the glory and the worship of Almighty God, and it could be used so much better than you're currently using it. Am I making sense to you? Now, it doesn't say that Tobiah brought anything evil in. It's just stuff. It was just, why, is there any, okay, Nehemiah, seriously, is there anything wrong with that bracket right there? I just put a bunch of stuff in a box. I had no idea what was that. Is there anything wrong with that bracket? Can you honestly tell me, Nehemiah, that that's an immoral, wrong bracket? Can you honestly tell me that there's something like that's sinful? Can you give me a verse that says, "Thou shalt not have brackets"? Can you just? And sometimes the devil comes along and he'll try to convince you that all this is legit and it's just fine. And if you just, that's nothing wrong with that. Come on, man. Come on. What are you trying to be all strict and goody two-shoes for? There's nothing wrong with that. Come on. The problem is who it belongs to. All right? Get it out of here. Because it's not about just that. It's that it belongs. If this room belongs to God, there's some things that aren't going to come in God's room. Secondly, is a man that took up resources that should have been God's. What about your time? What about your week? Do you have any time slots that you have blocked out? And it's me time, right? It's me time. And it's me time for, I deserve this. After the week that I've had, I just deserve this. This is me time, and I'm just going to take some me time. And I'm fine with me time as long as me time doesn't really mean Satan's time. You know what I'm saying? But he will creep in. Yeah, you try to. Me time kind of becomes my excuse for doing whatever else am I making sense to you? All right. Now, a man that distracted from the mission of the place where he was staying. The mission of the temple of God was to promote and recognize the glory of God and His mission for God's people. It was to promote the worship of the Lord. But this guy was distracting from that mission and taking away from the mission. You have a mission. Remember back at the beginning of this series, we talked about finding your why. Why do you exist? Why did God put you here? Find the thing where you say, that I'm not okay with it being like this. God's put me on the earth to make it like this. Find that thing. But you know what? When the devil comes in, he'll just say, you know what? I know about that purpose, yes. But why don't we just spend some time focusing on this? And he will just get you off mission. Have you ever had this experience in your life? Some of you are nodding your life. Yeah. where you're going along in your life and you've been in a really busy season at work, really busy season with your family, and a lot of junk is going on, and suddenly you sit down and you catch yourself, what am I doing right now? Like, how did this get into my life? How did this get in here? The devil, how did he get this into my life? I don't understand what happened. You know what? While you weren't looking, an enemy sneaked it in the back door, and if you let it stay, it'll grow in power and grow in size until it takes back over again. And when you find it, it's time to throw some stuff. It's time to throw some things. It's time to wash some walls. It's time to scrub some dirt off the floor. It's time to rededicate that space in your life to the mission God has called you to and the worship of God Almighty. Yeah. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 10. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them. Well, of course not. They'd been taken out of the storerooms, right? They'd been sitting outside. And all the Levites and singers responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. Well, yeah, they weren't being taken care of, and so they were like, well, we gotta survive. So since somebody cleared out these rooms where all our food used to be stored, and now Tobiah's in there, I guess we'll have to go grow our own food. And so making room for sin, making room for the enemy. In all honesty, this is why I don't have a television. My family doesn't have television. Some of you may not know that. You haven't been in our house. But I don't have one. The reason I don't is not because everything on TV is wrong. Okay, let's just get that. The reason I don't is not because technology is bad, or no, that's not the reason I don't have it. Let me tell you why I don't have a TV. Because I've got a temple here, and I've got a temple in my wife, and I've got 7 little temples. And I want the space in those brains, and my brain, to be filled up with what is good and righteous and true and not what is evil. That's why. Okay, you got real quiet because everybody's like, oh no, maybe he's telling me I should get rid of my TV. I'm not. Well, here's what I am saying. What I'm saying is there anything in your life that draws away? I'm not saying you got to go be Darrell. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is this, that the reason I don't have that in my life is because I'm not good at controlling it. What I find is this, that when I just allow myself to sit down and chill out for very long and just fill up empty time with whatever that person on that channel decided was important for me to see, that after a while, what I find is that person and what they thought was important on that channel suspiciously aligns with the agenda of Tobiah. With the agenda of a guy that really is my enemy. Let's just call him Satan, all right, because that's who he is, all right? And after a while, I'm like, why am I even watching this? Why am I even doing this? Why am I filling up my time with this? It seems like I used to have time to talk to the Lord. I used to have time to read the Bible. And now I don't because I have to binge watch one more season of whatever. No. The truth is that sometimes you got to find what it is for you. Now, for me, that's a very dangerous thing because the eyes are exceedingly powerful for me. I love art, I love beauty, I love pattern and structure and color. I love architecture because it's attractive. I see it, and I'm like, oh, that is good. That is nice. I see things in our city, and I love seeing beautiful things, and I love going to parks, and I love seeing patterns and watching, like even in architecture, I like looking at it and seeing what was the architect doing here? What was he trying to do? Anybody ever notice the Devon Tower looks like a blue jet of flame because it's Devon, and they dig for gas wells, right? And nobody ever noticed that? Yeah. That's because that's what I see, right? Anybody ever notice the Chesapeake Energy Arena when it's round like that and they've got those blue lights shining up all the way around the outside when you drive by? It looks like a gas burner. Because it's Chesapeake Energy. I see this stuff, but here's the thing. Now it's a great gift to be able to enjoy the world and enjoy art. My daughter brought me something she had painted this morning. She had done this little painting and had a little inscription around it, and everything give praise. She had a little thing, and she's going to finish painting. She brought it in and showed it to me this morning. I said, oh, that is beautiful. That is very nice. And I really enjoyed it. It's a great blessing. But you know what? Great blessings also come with some great big storage rooms that the enemy can use to snatch away the joy and fill it with something evil. And it's dangerous for me. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Look at your life and say, where's the danger point? In my temple, where's the danger point? What is it? Is it your phone? Is it your computer? Is it that friendship? Is it that relationship? Is it that person? Is it that activity? Is it that time slot? If I'm going to mess up, it's going to be in that time slot. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Where is your danger point? And if go in that danger point and check on a regular basis between you and the Lord and say, Lord, I just want to fill this place up with you so full that there's no room for the devil. I want to fill this place up so full of God that there's no room for anything the devil wants to store in my temple. It's not going to happen. And if you find something the devil has stored in there, scream, yell, and throw stuff and get it out. That's what I'm saying. So, listen to Romans, just in case you think I'm just pulling this out of my hat. Romans 13:13. Listen, let us behave decently, like in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and division and jealousy. Rather, okay, so let's not do this. These are the things we're clearing out. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not even think about how to gratify the desires of your sinful nature. Don't even think about how to do it. I wonder how I could. Don't even let that come in and live there, because if that thought comes in and lives there for a period of time, after a while, you'll do it. You can't let it live there. You got to go in and scream and throw things and make a scene and say, get out of here. I don't want you in there. Now, just so you know, if you live in an apartment and I get a call that you're in jail for disturbing the peace, we're going to have problems, okay? Because that's not real. I don't mean that. You know I'm not talking about actually throwing things. If I find out that somebody threw a plate at their husband or wife this week, I'm going to be so aggravated. Because that's not what I'm talking about. He preached about it. I have to do it. Yeah. So here's the thing. Spiritually, sometimes you need to go into those rooms and say, what's here? What is here? Why is this here? Who put it here? And then get it out. Amen. And it has to happen from time to time. You'll get it in a busy season, and the devil will try again. It is not the last time that he'll try. Last week was not his last time, right? The devil did not resign last night. And so tomorrow morning, actually today, before the day's over, he's going to be back on the job, and he's going to be trying to draw you back into the same thing. So here's, when you lived as a sinner, you used to make plans to disobey. Let me just make an observation. I have never met an addict that didn't have a plan. You know what I'm saying? Like I have never met an addict that did not have a plan, and I have tried on multiple occasions. I had a girl I was trying to help one time, and I knew she was struggling with it was pills for her, and I said, look, I've got to go out of town for a week, and I've got to go to this camp meeting that we run. It was in the summertime. It was a few years ago. I got to go to this camp meeting that we run. Why don't you and your 2 kids, why don't you guys come with us? Why don't you just go up there to that camp meeting, fill up this week with some time focusing on the Lord, right? Spend some time up there. You get 3 meals a day. There's activities for your kids. Why don't you go with us up to this camp meeting? No, because I can't, because actually I've got a guy I've got to go see about a job, and I really have to get a job because, and I knew like the Spirit was just definitely telling me that was not true. that she had, but you know what? In that moment, I'm not sure she knew it wasn't true. Because you get really good at planning. When you're in sin, you get really good at planning. You can plan to go to the store, and when you have two stores to go to, put two possibilities, you automatically somehow wind up at the one closer to your dealer's house. You know what I'm talking about? Like that, those of you you just wind up, like, I just happen to drop by over here, or I have never met an addict without a plan. But what he's saying in Romans 13 is don't even make plans that way. Instead, make plans for how to put on Jesus. Make plans for filling yourself and your life and your mind and your relationships and your weekends and find ways to fill that up with Jesus. Make it so full of what needs to be worship, the worship of God. And you know what? Every person that I know that has managed to get out of that and has stayed clean, every single person I know has emptied out some old things, yes, but they've also filled it back up with some Jesus things. Every person I know that has gotten out of it. Oh, I think sorry, we just bumped a switch back in the back and the lights went off. Oh, we're good. Yeah. He preached the lights out this morning. It was amazing. All right, here we go. So I rebuked, verse 11, so I rebuked the officials, and I asked them, why is the house of God neglected? Then I called them together and stationed them at their posts, and all of Judah brought the tithes of grain, new wine, and oil into the storerooms. Then I put Shelemiah, the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the storerooms, and made Hanan son of Zakur, son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because these men, now hear this, because these men were considered trustworthy. Okay. In your life, if you're going to empty out some old things and replace it with some good stuff, you're going to have to find people who you can trust with that. Right? You're going to have to find some relationships. By the way, church is a great place to do this. Right? Because this is family, y'all. This is family. This is new family. And if you got family and they've led you astray in the past, this is new family. Right? And I'm not saying you can't go help your family or talk to your family. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you're going to have to fill up some of these with some reliable people you know you can trust and put them in places in your life where you say, there's a guy that I call, or he actually calls me every Tuesday, and I talk with him for about 30 minutes. He's a fellow pastor, Darrell Underwood, out in Servants Heart Chapel in Clovis, New Mexico. And he calls and we talk for about 30 minutes, and we talk about what's going on in our life. We talk about what's stressing us out. We talk about issues. We're very honest and open with each other. We talk about temptations. You know why? Because I want somebody standing guard in my life that's trustworthy and I can count on. Somebody standing by the door of some storerooms. And when they see something going in that storeroom that doesn't belong to Jesus, I want them making a scene. All right? I want them to make a scene. Because these men were considered trustworthy. They were made responsible. Now look at verse 14. I'm going to choke up on this one, okay? Remember me for this, O my God, and do not blot out what I have so faithfully done for the house of my God and its services. Nehemiah uses this prayer several times through the book of Nehemiah. He's done his best. He's worked hard. It's been stressful. You think this was easy? You think it was easy to take the guy who was in charge and ream him out? And you think it was easy to throw the stuff out of here and make sure all this got done and put all the details together and get reliable people in there and get Tobiah and his associates out of there when they're influential enough to get in there in the first place? You think this was easy? No, this was not easy. This was hard. And there comes this moment where Nehemiah says, oh God, just remember me. Remember me. I don't have it all together. It's not like I've done this perfectly. I wish it hadn't happened in the first place. I wish this had never had to happen. But oh God, I'm trying. And I've been faithful as I know how. Oh God, remember me. Remember me, Lord. In the final analysis, I don't care if y'all don't remember me. I don't care because I didn't do it for you. But oh, to be remembered by God. Oh, to have Him know me. And when I stand before Him, to have Him not say, depart from me, I never knew you. Oh, to have Him remember me and say, well done, good and faithful servant. Come on in. Oh, to be remembered by God. You can live for whatever you want to live for. But oh, I want to live to be remembered by God. And if it costs me some things, if it costs me some relationships, it costs me some activities I could have done, if it costs me some things I could have put in my storeroom and it wouldn't have sent me to hell, if it costs me some hard moments and some difficult choices, that's okay. Because I want to be remembered by God. That's what I want. So here's what I'd say. Maybe for you, maybe you got some storerooms along the side of your temple. Maybe you need to go in there and look in some storerooms that you haven't looked into for a while and say, what is this? Why is it here? And make some scenes if you need to. Kick some stuff out. Give the devil an eviction notice in that room and get him out of there. And then don't forget, this isn't all about just kicking out old things. Let's fill it with Jesus. Let's fill it up with good. Let's fill it up with righteousness and holiness and fresh habits and new things. Maybe you need to add in a service on Wednesday here at church. Maybe you need to come and join us for times of prayer. Maybe you need to plug in some relationship. Maybe you need to hook up with somebody here and say, hey, can we do lunch this week? I'd like to talk to you. Just get to know you better because I need to fill up my life with some good people. Maybe, I don't know, but I think there's probably some storerooms need to pack them full. So full that there's no room for an enemy to sneak in. Would you bow your heads with me and let's pray?